Today I'll be reacting to is this the biggest difference between Europe and America? Well, friends, I really wonder what Lawrence is going to talk about. But before we go into that, let me ask you for one thing. If you can leave a like, thank you so much. Is the best way to show support. Now, if you can subscribe, well, in that case, forget about it. You make my day. Have that in consideration. Link for the original video description and split.
Hello, this video
Hey.
is sponsored by BritBox, the premier streaming service for Britain's most beloved TV shows. I'm Lawrence Brown and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond.
I know.
And one of those memos pertains to two things, size and history.
Size and distance.
Now, if you're a long-time subscriber of this channel, you may remember a few months ago that I did a video proclaiming the United States to be a small country. America can't be that massive, but
It is that massive. And to be fair, saying that America is a small country is difficult to believe because we can look at stats and also look at the real size in the map. So difficult to believe this one.
there is one equally small problem with this assertion. It completely and utterly a little bit contradicts my pinned tweet, which reads, "The biggest difference between Britain and America is that Americans think 100 years is a long time and the British think 100 miles is a long way." It's
Okay, to be fair, that quote is pretty smart because I also believe there is this difference between Europeans and Americans in the sense that if we think about modern America, by the way, I know Native Americans, crazy history, you can go very far back, but modern America is very recently. And to be fair, in such short period of time, the history is amazing in America. It's actually one of the American history is probably the history I like to study the most because I think in such short period of time, so many things end up happening that end up changing the world. That to me is very, very fascinating. But if you go 100 years back for the history of my country, that's nothing. To be fair, that's true. Now, 100 miles, I feel like that's a lot no matter where. But in America, you guys have a really weird perception of distance.
It's a profound quote, but the big question that I want to answer today is this. Is it even true? Well, before I shock you into the next century, if you are new to this channel and love hearing comparisons between my two countries and you haven't had a chance to subscribe, do that now.
My friends, good for
In
me.
the meantime, let's break up that pithy quote into two halves. In the first half, I'm going to take a look at the assertion that us Americans think 100 years is a long time. The implication being, of course, that we, the British, don't. So why is that? Well, present Lawrence can't answer that. Instead, I'm going to hand you over to Lawrence from 2 seconds from now. Thanks, past Lawrence. As you've probably figured out by now, I did not always reside in the United States. For the first 20 years of my life, I grew up in a town on the east coast of England called Grimsby. And Grimsby is just your standard English town, which also happens to produce YouTube sensations. But like most standard English towns, it contains one or two visual reminders of how old all of this is. Take, for example, the Grimsby Minster, a building that is located next to our shopping centre, what do we call it? Precinct. It dates back to the 12th century. And there's a reason that I'm going high-pitched there outside of the usual ones. And that's
My friends, here in my city, in my region, I have places that are old. I have a castle. That's crazy, right? That is 500 years old or something, maybe more. I don't even know for sure, to be honest with you, but I know it's very old. And this is everywhere. Churches that are 600 years old, this is very common here, honestly. And I know this is one of the things you guys don't have in America, but to me, that is so normal that I don't even think about it.
That's because now that I've lived in the United States for almost 15 years, I myself look back at the age of some of Britain's buildings and nearly burst with excitement. Because in your average American town or city, you're not likely to find buildings that go back more than 300 to 400 years. This is probably why Americans I've interacted with have always been so awestruck when I tell them things like, "Ooh, you know when I visited York? And I went to the top of that tower on a hill in the middle of the road called Clifford's Tower and I nearly got knocked off by the wind. That bastard was built in 1245, and that was only after an older version of it was destroyed by angry humans." And these are just some of the older
You know what? Now I have to check how old is the castle we have here because I really don't want to. I feel like I end up downplaying a lot. 500 years is nothing, right? Yeah, is more than 1,000 years old. Never mind.
The British dwellings that I've personally visited.
Is actually 12th century.
You go up to Scotland, to Orkney, where it's really cold, and there is a Neolithic farmstead called Knap of Howler, I hope I'm saying that right, that is, and I'm not making this up, 5,000 years old. But on this side of the pond, there is a massive counterpoint to all of this. Old Native American buildings. Did you know that in New Mexico...
No, and this is a very fair argument that I think Americans should bring more, because Native American history goes back a lot, right? And people almost forget about that.
Mexico, there is a historic, what is essentially apartment complex called
Very
Taos
famous.
Pueblo. And this is one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in the United States. It was built possibly as long ago as 1,000 years, making it perhaps older than Clifford's Tower. And I know what you think.
I mean, that's awesome, honestly.
Ooh, Lawrence, Native American history predates US history.
Sorry, but is this building an exception, or do you have similar things to this all across America?
Communities in the United States. It was built possibly as long ago as 1,000 years, making it perhaps older than Clifford's Tower. And I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Lawrence, Native American history predates US history. Isn't that cheating? Maybe, but technically Britain itself was only formed in the early 18th century, so you could argue that Clifford's Tower predates British history. That said,
And that's not a fair argument. I mean, at the end of the day, America belongs to that people, you know, so they are part of history. Of course, America right now is completely different, and modern America is a very unique thing, no doubt. But and Native Americans are still part of America right now, right? You still have a lot of people that come from Native American ancestry. So to me, that's American history 100%.
In most towns and cities in the United States, you won't easily find structures as old as this, which is why Americans were probably surprised when I told them that the signing of the Magna Carta, which is a royal charter of rights, signed in 1215, may have been witnessed by someone who is still alive today. And when I say somebody, I mean a tree. This yew tree in Runnymede, England is said to have been present at the sealing of the Magna Carta and might be as old as 2,500 years.
Wait, but California, for example, don't have some of the oldest trees in the world also?
Which brings me on to my next counterpoint. The world's oldest tree is not in England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. It's in Eastern California. You see, us humans have a tendency to forget that life exists outside of our own species, and that...
Not me, my friends. I know American history. I mean, not as well as you, but I know that America have crazy history. I mean, crazy history.
This Great Basin bristlecone pine is older than the pyramids. Not to mention that America is also a place where they find a lot of the dinosaurs. And I'm not just talking about the Senate chamber. Okay, fine, but to keep it in terms that we understand, let's talk once again about humans. You see, in addition to old buildings and trees, Britain has entire historic towns. And they don't come much more historic than the mighty Colchester. Because Colchester, originally known as Camalodunum, is said to be the oldest recorded town in Britain. How old is it? Well, by the order of a few decades, it's older than Jesus Christ. The old buildings and walls that you see in the town today were added by the Romans, who invaded over the next couple of 100 years. And again...
Here in Portugal, real talk, my friends, I don't want to, but we also have those.
To me, that is mind-blowing, because for the last 15 years I've lived in a country where famously the first attempt at an English settlement occurred as recently as the late 16th century, which, if you ran a clock of the Earth's history, was a mere few seconds ago. But I hope you're ready for another counterpoint, because here comes one.
Okay, before we go to the counterpoint, let me say one thing. When I was in school, some of the school trips we did was to see things that the Roman Empire ended up left here in Portugal, you know, roads. But there is a bunch of different stuff. So this is something, again, that for me I will not say very common, but I'm very familiar, you know.
Here in the US, I've personally visited a complex and once highly populated historic settlement that was built not long after Colchester. Cahokia Mounds, right here in Illinois, was first devised in the year 600,
so beautiful.
with its famous green mounds constructed by its native inhabitants 200 years later. And at the height of the town's popularity, it had more people living in it than London. That's London then, not London now. That would be mental. And so we reach the second half of the quote. The British think 100 miles is a long way. The implication there being that Americans think nothing of such a distance. And largely,
I mean, is this true, my friends? Come on, 100 miles is a lot, no matter where, no matter if you live in Europe, in China, or in America.
this is true. I have family members who live about 200 miles from me, and we drive down to them every time there's a holiday. Just because the trains are crap, but also because that's just a normal holiday commute for some Americans.
Really?
Who may even choose to go further than that and have little to no qualms. But then it got me thinking.
Wait, let me. I know more or less the conversion to kilometers, but let me make sure I'm understanding this well. Miles to kilometers. Because I know it's 1.5, 1.6 kilometers, something like that. 100 miles is a lot of kilometers, my friend. Is 160 kilometers.
There are some Americans who like to run. I'm looking at you, Forrest. Yeah, run. Not just to their mama's house, but from one coast of the United States to the other. And we're not just talking in the movies. There are actual humans who wake up one morning and go, I've got a plan. I'm going to run across the United States like a maniac. And if you want an idea of just how wide this country is, the fastest person to ever do it is a man called Pete Kostelnik. And even for him, it took 42 days to run from San Francisco to New York City. And as somebody myself who hasn't run since 1998, that sounds like an eternity. But it got me thinking about the most well-known long-distance run you can do in Britain. This is from John O'Groats in northern Scotland down to Land's End in the extreme end of Cornwall. And the quickest that anybody's ever run that distance is just over 9 days. And it got me thinking either.
Holy, look at the difference. 9 days. Oh, America is so massive.
Britain has really slow runners, or counterpoint.
And they are bigger than Portugal.
The distance from north to south is much longer than I imagined, but more on that in a moment. Because first we have to acknowledge that in this very country, most people, like me, don't run. In fact, this is America, land of the automobile. Most people drive. So in the interest of distance, what is the longest that somebody can drive in this country while always remaining on the same interstate? The answer? Interstate 90, which runs from the east coast to the west at a distance of just over 3,000 miles. For comparison, that is longer than taking a flight from Manchester Airport in England to Bangor Airport in the state of...
What? Wait. We are going to run that part back. That's a bit insane, no? Sorry. Let's pay attention. I was paying attention, but I really want to make sure I understood this correct.
But more on that in a moment. Because first we have to acknowledge that in this very country, most people, like me, don't run. In fact, this is America, land of the automobile.
Land of
most
the
people
free
drive.
and the
So in the
automobile.
interest of distance, what is the longest that somebody can drive in this country while always remaining on the same interstate? The answer? Interstate 90, which runs from the east coast to the west at a distance of just over 3,000 miles. For comparison, that is
3,000 miles, my friends. What? Oh my God, America is massive. Well, friends, Lawrence keeps saying that 100 miles for Americans is nothing. Do you guys agree with this? I mean, 100 miles is so much. If I will drive 100 miles, I'm in Spain. It's crazy.
Is longer than taking a flight from Manchester Airport in England to Bangor Airport in the state of Maine. And do you know how I know that? Because that was my first ever flight. And when you're flying over nothing but a giant pond for 8 hours, it can feel like an eternity. So have fun on I-90. Oh, and if you're looking for a counterpoint on this particular one, you'll equally be waiting until the end of time, because I don't have one. Because the longest motorway in Britain is the M6, which clocks in at a paltry 231 miles. But
to be fair, I think is also, to be fair, I think is unfair. Compare America with the UK, Portugal, or France, because I know America is one country and not a continent, but come on, can we also be real? It's too massive. I think we need to compare Europe with Europe. All the countries together, because otherwise this is not a real comparison. And even if you do that comparison, things of course get quite more close. But I saw something that made me think a lot. Don't quote me on this, but it was something like that. We have 400 million people or 450 million people in Europe. Americans are a bit over 300 million, but Americans make almost 2 or 3 times more money than Europe. It was a stat, again, don't quote me on this, but it was insane. I kind of was aware because I react to a lot of this stuff, and the American economy, even if is not doing as well nowadays, is still pretty strong comparing with other places.
But it's worth pointing out that Interstate 90 doesn't even represent the longest distance between two cities in the continental United States.
What?
To do that, you'd have to travel from Point Arena, California, all the way to West Quoddy Head. That's a real place in the state of Maine. In total, that distance is 3,527 miles, which brings us back to John
My friends, if I drive that, I go from Portugal to China.
O'Groats to Land's End, which, while nowhere as long as its American counterpart, is still 837 miles, which is about a quarter the American distance that I just mentioned. Remember, the United States is approximately 40 times the size of the United Kingdom. And so counterpoint, while Britain might be lacking in the girth department, it makes up for it with
I don't know the size Portugal versus America, how much bigger America is, and I don't want to know. So don't type that in the comment section. Please don't do it. That will make me feel a bit depressed. But I know one thing. Texas is, I'm not sure, 7 times or 11 times bigger. But I remember seeing that. Either way, it's crazy.
Pretty decent length. Get your minds out of the gutter. And so, in conclusion, I would have to say that my pinned tweet is sort of correct. Americans do occasionally think that 100 years is a long time, until they think about it for a moment. This whole country is filled with ancient history, whether we're talking about human or natural. And the UK, while its people, my people, might be mad at me for consistently pointing out that it is in fact smaller than 11 different United States, it is also bigger than some of them, and longer than most of them. Probably. I haven't done the maths. So it simply remains for me to return to my Twitter account at LostInThePondUS and share this video beneath my pinned tweet as a pretty solid counterpoint. Until next time, that's it for this episode. You can also follow me on Threads at lawrence.m.
Okay, my friends, show him all the support. That said, let me take a look at that quote and share my final thoughts here. Because it's a really interesting quote. It's for the UK versus America, I'm aware of that. But I think it's a quote that can be applied to Europe, specific countries, of course. So the biggest difference between Britain and America is that Americans think 100 years is a long time and the British think 100 miles is a long way. So, my friends, I have a question. First of all, American history is quite older than 100 years. Native American history is actually fascinating, and at the end of the day, I think Americans should talk about that more. Of course, modern America is very recent. It's very recently, but I don't know, my friends. Do you guys agree that 100 miles is not a long way? Because that makes me difficult to believe. I think the distance should be a lot no matter what. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this with me, my friends. Really means a lot. You guys end up staying until the end. See you guys in the next one. Bye.